The Okafor Group boardroom was silent enough to hear the air conditioning hum. When the anonymous, pristine folder landed on the table, it carried the weight of a generational sin. For the Okafor family, exploitative labor wasn't just a compliance risk, it was a ghost from 20 years ago that they had spent billions trying to bury. Seo's forged sourcing document, detailing horrific labor violations deep within S.Y. Tress's supply chain, was timed like a precision strike. It bypassed the standard vetting channels and struck the single nerve guaranteed to panic the board. By afternoon, Olajide was backed into a corner by his own directors. The pressure was immediate, institutional, and absolute. To protect the Okafor name, he had to cut the cord publicly before the ink on their partnership could even dry.
Later, in a sterile holding room, his one-on-one with Seo-yeon was a study in repressed grief. The professional distance between them felt like a vast chasm. "I should have called you before I called my lawyers," Olajide said, his voice flat with regret. "I know that. I'm sorry." Seo-yeon stepped closer, her eyes burning with an urgency he couldn't comprehend. "Then call me now. Ask me anything." He looked at her, the silence stretching between them, heavy and unresolved. But the institutional machinery was already moving too fast. He didn't ask. He couldn't. Sohee's second strike landed simultaneously, aimed at the foundation of Seo-yeon's personal life. She delivered a doctored voice memo to Taemin. It was an expert piece of audio manipulation, taking a tense, late-night professional argument between Seo-yeon and Olajide and editing out the context until it sounded like the breathless, intimate murmurs of an affair in progress. Taemin sat alone in his car, the dashboard lights casting a cold blue glow over his face. He listened to the file once, then he listened to it again. He had been primed for this by weeks of unexplained late nights, sudden cancellations, and the distant, haunted look in his wife's eyes. When he confronted Seo-yeon at home, there was no shouting. The lack of violence was worse. It felt like a total evacuation of warmth. He placed his phone face up on the dining table between them, said almost nothing, and quietly told her he needed space. The click of the front door closing behind him carried the finality of a gavel. The structural collapse of S.Y. Tress's began within 48 hours. Spooked by the sudden Okafor withdrawal and the whispered rumours of a labour scandal, international buyers began quietly pulling their contracts. In the office, Jua sat surrounded by spreadsheets, her voice cracking as she laid out the grim reality. The company's burn rate was fatal. They wouldn't survive the quarter. It was the exact financial abyss Seo-yeon had died facing in her original life, arriving right on schedule, just in a different room of her existence. That evening, Seo-hee stood at her vanity, staring into the mirror. The apartment was perfectly quiet. She had watched her sister's life come apart precisely according to her grand design, but the anticipated rush of triumph never arrived. Instead, there was a hollow, echoing numbness. She slowly slid her wedding rings off her finger, placing them on the marble surface with a dull clink. "Why doesn't this feel like winning?" she whispered to her reflection. For the first time, a hairline fracture appeared in her ironclad certainty. But she had been too consumed by her sister's ruin to notice her own perimeter. In a parallel track of malice, the Choi family subplot reached its boiling point. Min-jae's mother, operating with a cold, aristocratic pragmatism, formally filed a forged infidelity claim against Seo-hee. It was a calculated legal maneuver designed to completely nullify the marriage and seize every asset and dowry tied to it, leaving Seo-hee exposed and unprotected. Across town at his hotel, Olajide stared out at the city skyline. On his phone, a voicemail from Seo-yeon played. It was raw, completely unvarnished, and stripped of the polished spin she usually wore like armor. She explained everything: the truth of the documents, the setup, and the parts of her reality that sounded nearly insane, though she caught herself just before mentioning the time loop. Olajide sat with the recording for a long, heavy moment. He was deeply moved, but the corporate trap had already snapped shut around him.
Meanwhile, Tae-min was sitting in his temporary apartment, the doctored audio file looping for a third time. His thumb hovered over the playback bar. Then he caught it. A microscopic, half-second digital glitch. A sudden drop in ambient room tone that shouldn't be there. A splice. The first seed of doubt planted itself in his mind, turning his suspicion away from his wife and back toward the source of the tape. At midnight, Seo-yeon sat alone in her darkened office, the city lights bleeding through the glass. Her phone buzzed on the desk. It was her husband's lawyer, informing her that Tae-min had filed for formal separation. Before she could process the blow, the phone buzzed a second time. It was her corporate bank. Due to the sudden volatility of her accounts, the company's line of credit had just been frozen. The trap was complete. Her marriage and her life's work were dismantled in a single hour.
The following weeks descended into a brutal, low-contrast montage of ruin. Seo-yeon sat in a sterile legal office, her hand steady as she signed the separation papers, though her face remained dead and pale. Outside her corporate headquarters, workers took down the polished SY Tresses sign, leaving behind an ugly, faded outline on the concrete wall. In the stockroom, Jua sat on a stack of flat-packed shipping boxes, crying softly into her hands. Seo-yeon dialed Olajide's number, listening to the monotonous ring until it cut to voicemail. Once, twice, 3 times. Total radio silence. Late one night, walking through the emptied, echoing stairwell of her office building, Seo-yeon's foot missed a step. Her weight shifted violently, and she caught the metal railing with a sharp, jarring crack against her wrist.
There was no one there to catch her. It was an exact visual echo of her sudden, fatal fall in the film's opening scene. But this time, the world remained stubbornly, brutally quiet. She hung there against the steel for a beat of pure silence, before forcing her weight back onto her feet and continuing down the stairs. At the same time, the legal notice landed in the Choi household. Seo-hee stood in her immaculate kitchen, the documents trembling slightly in her hand. The forged infidelity claim was a mirror image of the trap that had destroyed her in the first timeline. Only this time, it was being executed by people who had no conscious memory of doing it before. For the first time in either life, the calculating mask dropped from Seo-hee's face, leaving her looking remarkably young, small, and terrified.
She stormed into her mother-in-law's home, demanding an explanation. But the older woman's cold, unblinking disregard delivered a horrific realization. Every ounce of cruelty Seo-hee had manufactured to destroy her sister had changed absolutely nothing about her own institutional value to the Chois. They were always going to discard her when it suited them. The game was rigged from the start,
She couldn't win by becoming as cruel as the world, because the world had a centuries-old head start. Back in her office, surrounded by boxes of old financial records, Seo-yeon was looking for a way to fight the bank's credit freeze. Instead, her fingers snagged on a hidden layer of digital correspondence. As she opened the files, the trail of her company's sabotage unfurled before her. The IP addresses, the wire transfers, the falsified documents.
Every single thread led directly back to an account controlled by her sister. Seo-yeon stared at the screen for a long time. There was no anger, no righteous satisfaction, only a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. But as she dug deeper into the older, archived folders of her late father's estate, she hit a second, deeper layer of history. Buried beneath old tax filings was a series of 20-year-old letters between her father and the Okafor family regarding a catastrophic, cancelled international venture. The two families shared a bitter, secret history that neither daughter had ever been told. Seo-yeon took the documents straight to her childhood home, bursting through the door to demand answers from her mother. Instead, she found Mi-suk sitting frozen at the kitchen table, an old, faded cardboard shoebox open in front of her. Inside was a tiny, worn child's shoe.
Mi-suk flinched, instinctively trying to pull the lid back over the box. "Not now, Seo-yeon. Please, not yet." Seo-yeon, who had already died once in the dark and had nothing left to lose, stepped forward and gripped the edge of the table. "No. No more, not yet." The front door opened, and Tae-min stepped into the hallway. He had come uninvited, driven by the discovery of the audio splice. He didn't offer a reconciliation. He just looked at her with a raw, searching intensity. "I just need to know if any of it was real," he said plainly. Seo-yeon, stripped of her professional composure and utterly drained by the weight of the secrets in the room, didn't bother to spin the narrative. "I don't know how to explain it without sounding insane," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "I think I've already lived parts of this before." Tae-min didn't pull away. He didn't scoff. He remained exactly where he was, standing firm in the doorway, and that silence spoke louder than any apology.
Then, the door opened a second time. Seo-hee walked in. The legal nullification papers were clutched in her hand, her posture shattered. For the first time in either timeline, she came without an agenda, without a weapon, and without a lie. She looked at her sister with hollow eyes. "I'm losing everything too," Seo-hee said softly, her voice cracking. "And I don't understand why winning never felt the way it was supposed to." The room grew perfectly still. Seo-yeon looked at her husband, then down at the ruined, weeping sister who had spent months orchestrating her downfall. Finally, she took the faded shoebox from her mother's trembling hands and set it squarely in the center of the table. With both daughters present in the light for the first time, Seo-yeon looked her mother dead in the eye, voicing the question that had haunted every timeline. "Oma," Seo-yeon said, her voice steady and terrifyingly quiet. "How long has this actually been happening? And was it ever really about us at all?"
If this story has its hooks in you, hit that like button, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments below, because you do not want to miss what happens next.